Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and I am going to do a wrap-up of all the audiobooks I listened to in December. I've decided to split out my physical reading either in print or Kindle and my audiobooks into separate categories. And this is mostly to facilitate my 100 book challenge, because I'm not counting my audiobooks towards my 100 book challenge. So I'm just going to review them in a separate video, at least for now. So what audiobooks did I listen to in December? The first was The Maniac by Benjamin Labatut. Not 100% sure of the pronunciation. And he is an author who grew up in Chile. He wrote his first book in Spanish. He now lives in the Netherlands, I believe, and wrote The Maniac in English. And it is an experimental novel, and a very good one at that. It shows you exactly how good experimental novels can go. I did watch an interview with the author when he's talking about the difference between fiction and nonfiction, because The Maniac is written in a style that's very nonfiction-y. It is a series of monologues of characters, mostly during the 20th century. And he got these opinions doing a lot of research about the characters, because all the characters in this book are real characters. There are no made-up characters, so far as I know, or at least no major made-up characters. And the interview was asking, well, why didn't you just do this book as a biography? And his comment was that all nonfiction is fiction, which is a curious thing to say. Well, anyway, this book essentially is about Jean von Neumann, who was a very famous mathematician and physicist during the 20th century. Now, the book starts off with Paul Ernsfeld, who was an Austrian physicist and a friend of Einstein, who was an influence to Jean von Neumann. And the first part of the book is Ernstfeld's story. And right away you learn that he has committed suicide and murdered his intellectually undeveloped son. And then you actually go to the second part, which is about Jean von Neumann. And Jean von Neumann is probably best known for his theory of von Neumann machines, which are machines which can create themselves and improve upon themselves, which was done way before there was robotics in any sense of the word. So this, again, is told by colleagues and friends and wives of Jean von Neumann and what they thought of him. Now, because this is told from the viewpoint of a monologue, you get different viewpoints of Jean von Neumann, but you never get to actually meet Jean von Neumann outside of someone else's viewpoint. And that, again, is an interesting way to show a character. And in this book, you're going to have to be a little intellectually curious, because Jean von Neumann was one of those mega geniuses of the 20th century, way beyond me, super smart in math, and a pioneer in creating computers. Now, there is one chapter, which I will give as an example, where a colleague of von Neumann, he's talking about Gödel. He was a mathematician. And it goes into Gödel's theory that there can be true mathematics that cannot be proven. And that, again, is mathematics on a scale way above what I will ever know and truly learn. But it's a fascinating subject to view from a distance and see how other people view it. So then you go through the life of von Neumann, and it takes him over his whole life. You get his career early in mathematics, and then working on the bomb in the United States and New Mexico. And he really did help create the nuclear bomb. And then he essentially created a theory of robotics and intelligent machines and computers, which is fascinating to me because I once was a computer programmer when I had a day job and before I retired. So that part was entirely fascinating. Again, you have to be curious to want to really read this book and get through this book. If you're just looking for an action story, this is not going to be for you. But the life of Jean von Neumann was really kind of fascinating. Now, the third part is about a South Korean Go master. Now, Go is a game that is played in Asia for the most part. There are some European and Americans that play it, but it's mostly a European game of white and black stones. And the theory was that Go was so complicated that you could not create a computer program that could play the game to any sufficient level. But a computer programmer did program a computer that could beat the world expert. And that part is based on a true story again. And it's just an utterly fascinating thing to see this master of this game Go sort of losing it as he's realizing that a computer can outthink him. And before that, it was believed unthinkable that a good computer could even play Go. I highly recommend The Maniac by Benjamin Labatut. The next audiobook was Spartacus by Howard Fast, originally published in 1951. The edition I had a brief introduction from the author saying that he had a lot of trouble getting this published originally. A lot of publishers just didn't want to touch it, in part because Howard Fast was, at least in his youth, flirting with communism in an era before people really understood communism in the Soviet Union very well. So a lot of intellectuals back in the 30s and 40s did flirt with communism. Well, anyway, Spartacus is the story set in around 71 BC of the slave revolt led by the slave Spartacus. And again, this is a story mostly told from other people's recollections about Spartacus. It starts off on a Romans traveling down the road, and there's all these crucifixions of the former slaves that rebelled against Rome, because that's the fitting punishment for a slave against Rome. And slowly the characters start talking about this slave, this Spartacus, who dared to raise above his life as a slave to want to be a free man. And it was just a fascinating and excellent story. It was written in 51, but it was a thrilling story. And yet, when you hear Spartacus talk, now in this one, you do get to meet Spartacus close up. He's talking with his, I guess you'd call her his wife, who was a slave. And he was given this slave girl to keep him entertained when he was a gladiator, because that's where Spartacus rose up. He originally worked in the mines, and the life in a mine was very short and brutal. But a Roman saw his potential to be an excellent gladiator and a fighter. So he was brought to Rome to be part of the gladiatorial games. Now, most people will probably know Spartacus from a very famous movie starring Kirk Douglas. Somewhere in the back of my mind, when I was a young boy or a young man, I'm pretty sure I saw the movie version of Spartacus. Nothing really remains of that movie in my brain, except for one scene, which is probably his most famous scene, which I guess is a spoiler to say that it's not in this novel. Either way, the novel of Spartacus was great. As I said, I'm not sure I mentioned it, there's even hints of the communism that Howard Fast flirted with, because the life that Spartacus wanted was a life for all men to be free. And I could just see that tinge of communism sneaking through the will of Spartacus and what he wanted. Again, that is a highly recommended book. The next audiobook was The Touch by F. Paul Wilson. This is a book originally published in 1986 as a standalone novel. It was revised in 2004 to fit into another series of novels. I'm not sure how much changed from the original. I did read the original version, probably 1990, maybe 1989, somewhere around there. And this audiobook was based on the 2004 edition, which had some revisions in it of what, again, I'm not exactly sure. Well, anyway, this is the story of a doctor in New York, Alan Bennett. He is a family doctor. And one of his patients is a sort of wealthy widow with her severely autistic son. And he visits her one evening because the son is having some sort of a medical condition, and the doctor just says it's not much. He'll be okay in the morning. And when he's driving home, because he did a house call, he meets a homeless man who points to going like, "You're the one." And he just speeds away from the homeless man. A little while later, I think it's a few days, he again meets this homeless man in the hospital. He's having a severe medical condition. And being a doctor in the hospital, he approaches him, and the man goes, "You're the one." And the homeless man grabs Alan, I think it's by the wrist, and he feels this electric charge go through him. And Alan passes out on the floor. When he wakes up, the homeless man is dead. And then the next day, when Alan is treating a deaf girl, she was a teenage girl who had a condition that she was suddenly deaf in one ear. The girl, as he touches her ear, feels a shock. And then she regains her hearing. And slowly, Dr. Allen realizes that he has a healing touch, that if he touches a patient at a certain time during the day for a limited time, he can heal whatever condition that patient has. Unfortunately, it seems that he's becoming more and more forgetful with each patient that he cures. And so this is a fun little, I'm not going to say it's a horror novel, even though F. Paul Wilson did write a lot of horror novels. It's more of a suspense thriller with a little bit of the supernatural thrown in. And of course, things are going to get really bad because his patients start talking about this healing touch. And there is this doctor, not a doctor, he's a senator named, what was his name? McGreedy, who has a very severe medical condition. And he's curious to understand if Dr. Allen is a charlatan or really has the healing touch, because this senator wants to be president of the United States. But the polls say that people will not trust a man who has a severe medical condition. And they would trust a man even less if his medical condition suddenly disappeared. Now, fortunately for the senator, no one knows he's really sick yet. But can he get this doctor to heal him and let no one know about it? That is the crux. It's a good book. It's not really great, but it's a good thriller. The next book I finished was Where the Dead Wait by Ali Wilkes, published in 2023. It is an historical horror novel. There are two time frames to this story. One is in the 1860s and one is in the 1880s, or thereabout. It is about exploring the North Pole. They're looking for the Northwest Passage, which leads across the pole to the other side of the world. Unfortunately, in the 1861s, their ship gets stranded in the ice, and they have to abandon it and try to find a way back to civilization on foot. Things do not go well. They are running out of food, but they are not running out of explorers who have died or who will die. And, well, it's a food source. So this commander, William Day, who was originally just a lieutenant on the ship, but became the leader after the captain died, goes back in disgrace because they know that William Day ate people. He was a cannibal. Well, then comes the 1880s. One of Day's shipmates, Stevenson, has gone back to the North Pole again to try to find this Northwest Passage. And again, he has disappeared. And his wife wants another group of explorers to go down and see if they can rescue him. And William Day, of course, is the logical choice to go look for his old shipmate. So they go down with the wife to find the Stevenson, the guy who's disappeared. But Stevenson's wife is also a spiritual medium, and she's trying to call up the spirits to see if he is dead or they can lead him to him. But something is coming through the spirit world. The dead who have been eaten and are not really happy about it. Now, the problem with this book I have is it's okay. There were some confusing parts when I was listening to this book where I was not exactly clear what was happening. The intermingling of the time zones, why stated at the beginning of each chapter, was a little fuzzy once you got into the details. I had to stop and say, wait a second. Is this the then chapter or the now chapter? The then chapter was the 1860s and the now was the 1880s. And I got a little confused. I did not get confused like that, like in Spartacus, where you did have some time shifts. You were always crystal clear on whether it's a Spartacus tale told in the past or current tale told about Spartacus at the time, right after the slave revolt. It was always clear with Howard Fast. Howard Fast probably is just a better author than Allie Wilkes is. So there's that part. And it just did not wholly work for me. I really liked the setting. I love these ideas of historical events in a horror story, especially taking it to the North Pole, where we have these harsh and brutal conditions. The problem is, I never really was there in the North Pole with the characters. Now, if you take another historical novel in the North Pole, The Terror by Dan Simmons, yeah, you are right there in the North Pole. You feel that brutality of the cold much more than I felt it in Where the Dead Wait. Can I recommend this book? Yeah, sure. It's a fine novel. I enjoyed it. I probably would not recommend the audio version just because parts of it were a little unclear to me, and maybe it would be a little clearer in a print or Kindle version. Well, those are the books that I read or listened to in December. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading or listening.